tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. That's SOS. I heard it through a steel storm shelter door behind my 84-year-old neighbor's house. A cheap lock stared back at me. 4, 2, 1, 1. I spun the dials, the shank popped, and heat rolled out like an oven. On the steps lay the choir director who baked lemon cookies for half our town, zip-tied, furious, alive. The man calling himself her caregiver had just driven away. In the ER, they called it elder abuse. At the bank, a fraud officer whispered there was a pattern. At church, people remembered forms she never meant to sign. He said it was safety. It was control. So I asked him to meet me at Dee's Diner. 1 booth, 1 cardigan, 1 button-sized microphone. He slid a velvet pouch across the table, the ring he kept safe, and told me why he needed the deed, why his management fee was reasonable, why I should stop making trouble I couldn't carry. Then he reached into his bag and learned who else was listening. There would be a judge, a pen that drew a line with weight, and a town that decided to be nosy on purpose. By the end, you'll know the difference between safety and control, and why 4 numbers, 4211, still live in my head. I'm Joan Walker, 62, retired postmaster. This is how the knocking started, and why we answered. I live on a quiet cul-de-sac in Larkspur, Indiana, the kind of town where the hardware store has a bell that rings when you open the door, and the lady at the diner writes your usual on the ticket before you sit down. I know which neighbors forget trash day and which ones mow diagonal stripes into their lawns like it's the county fair. Back when Brian was alive, we'd walk after supper and wave at everybody. After I lost him 2 years ago, the walking turned into wandering. Grief rearranges the streets you've known your whole life and makes you check house numbers twice. My place backs up to a little slope and a maple tree that puts on a parade in October. Past the maple is the backyard of my neighbor, Edith Morales. She's 84, former choir director, a woman who taught a generation of Larkspur kids to find middle C and stand tall. She calls me Walker, not Joan, like we're teammates. If you dropped by unannounced at 9 in the morning, you'd find her in a cardigan the color of sherbet, a spritz of lavender behind each ear, and a plate of lemon cookies cooling on the counter because it isn't hospitality if you only offer coffee. Her piano has a dent on the left side of the bench where her late husband Frank used to set his keys. I know these details because some people are landmarks in small towns, and Edith is one of them. When Kyle Benton started helping Edith in June, he arrived the way trouble usually does, in a nice sweater with a church picnic smile. 30-something, clean haircut, deep dimples, and a way of looking at old ladies like they were china teacups he would never chip. He said, "I just want to serve," handing out hymnals at First Methodist and stacking chairs like a man auditioning for sainthood. He told folks he worked for a home care service part-time. He was good at carrying heavy things, grocery bags, laundry baskets, other people's burdens. He fixed the cabinet door that kept sagging in Edith's kitchen and insisted on changing the porch light bulbs because stairs are not your friend, Miss M. At first I was grateful. My knees weren't thrilled about running over every time Edith needed the top shelf. Cooperating is the religion of small towns. But then little things started to snag. He began collecting her mail to save her a trip. He took her phone one afternoon and came back the next morning saying, "It was clogged with old photos. I cleaned it up." He positioned himself at her elbow when neighbors came by, answering for her like she suddenly didn't have a voice. When I dropped off a casserole, he stepped between us. "Miss Morales is resting," he whispered, like I'd forgotten we were friends. "Resting?" Edith called from the living room, sharper than any whisper. "Walker, is that you? Come in and tell me if the weather forecast is lying again." Kyle smiled at me without warmth. Later, Edith squeezed my hand and said, "He's helpful. He's also a little much. I'm trying not to be ungrateful." We both laughed the kind of laugh that is half joke, half signal flare. On the last Thursday of September, the tornado sirens ran their monthly test at noon and scared the visiting grandkids into shrieks. It had been one of those late summer days when the air sits heavy and the thunderheads tease but don't commit. I was watering mums along the fence line and wiping sweat off my nose with the back of my wrist when I saw Kyle rolling a big yellow toolbox across Edith's yard. He'd taken off his sweater and tied it around his waist like a camp counselor. He popped the lid on Edith's old storm shelter, the kind set into the ground with a metal door and a set of steps that go down to a concrete box, and disappeared inside with the toolbox.
Edith's shelter hasn't been used for years. Frank used to store his fishing lures down there, and once a raccoon family moved in and Frank declared it a shared property until they vacated. It was odd, Kyle messing with it. Maybe, I told myself, he was doing a good deed, clearing out cobwebs, making sure the hinges worked. The last time we had a real scare was years back. Still, it was hot. Something about the timing made my neck prickle. He came up, wiped his hands with a shop towel, pulled the shelter door down, and did something to it that clicked. Then he walked to his silver SUV like he'd just taken out the trash. He didn't look up at Edith's back windows. He didn't wave. He adjusted his hair in the side mirror. I would have gone inside and poured iced tea if not for the sound that came next. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't a creak. It wasn't the wind. It was deliberate and thin and far away, and it crawled up my arms. I dropped the hose. "Edith," I called, already moving. "Edith, can you hear me?" Tap, tap. Then silence. My palms went slick. "Kyle," I shouted. He didn't turn. He got in the SUV and pulled away as if errands were urgent. I reached the shelter and pulled at the handle. A cheap combination lock hung there, the kind you buy near the register at the hardware store. I pressed my ear to the metal. Heat radiated into my cheek. The tapping came again, weaker. I can't explain why my hand found numbers. Maybe I noticed earlier without knowing I noticed. The way he spun the dials, the numbers his thumb lingered on. Maybe it was a miracle. Maybe it was muscle memory from sorting zip codes for 30 years. I turned the dial to 4211. The shank popped. The lock fell into my palm like a dead bird. The door groaned when I pulled. Stale heat rolled out, laundry room hot, attic hot. My throat went tight. "Edith!" She lay on the bottom step, one wrist zip-tied to the rail, a dish towel stuffed under her chin like a rag to keep a mess from spreading. Her face was waxy and furious. A church bulletin was tucked into the waistband of her robe, the title circled in red ink. "Send out your light and your truth." I dropped to my knees, tore the towel away, and squeezed her fingers. "Honey, I'm here. You're okay. We're getting you out." Her voice was dry and small. He said it was for safety. He said storms. He said I get confused. "You get cross words," I said. "That's not the same thing." I took my pruning shears from my back pocket and snipped the zip tie. Her skin was chafed red. She winced, but gave me a look that could tune a choir. "Don't you dare cry, Walker. Call the number." I did. The 911 operator's voice was steady. I gave the address, told her about the shelter, the heat, the zip tie. "Is she conscious?" the operator asked. "Yes," I said, and squeezed Edith's hand to feel her squeeze back. "Small sips of water if you have it. No big gulps. Keep her cool. Help is on the way." I found the water bottle in my bag, the one that Brian used to tease me about always carrying, and dabbed some on a paper towel for Edith's lips. "Just a little," I said. "We're going to the hospital, and then we're going to make some people very unhappy." Sirens thread their way through neighborhoods differently when you know they're coming for you. I never realized how many oak trees we had until the red lights painted their undersides. The paramedics, a woman with a freckled nose and a man who moved like everything was solvable, took one look and got to work. Severe heat stress, the woman said, checking her pulse. Possible dehydration. Let's roll. When they loaded her into the ambulance, I climbed in without asking. The freckled paramedic nodded me to the jump seat. You ride. Keep talking to her. Familiar voices help. In the ER at St. Anne's, everything smells like hand sanitizer and coffee that's been on a warmer too long. They tucked Edith behind a curtain, started fluids, checked vitals. A nurse whose name tag read Diane tucked a warm blanket around Edith's shoulders because sometimes warmth calms even when you've been too hot. Your skin temp can lie when you've been stressed. We'll get you balanced. I stood at the edge of the bed, hands in fists I didn't notice I was making. When the curtain whisked open, I flinched.
Miss Walker? A woman in a navy blazer stepped in, badge in hand. I'm Detective Sergeant Bree Matthews, Marion County. The ER flagged this as suspected elder abuse. Can I ask you a few questions? I told her everything. The toolbox, the lock, the numbers that shouldn't have stuck in my head but did, the tapping. Her pen paused over the page when I said it. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, 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 I said. It was like code. It's Morse, Bree nodded. SOS. A second woman stepped in, softer voice, quick eyes. Tamika Rhodes, Adult Protective Services. Miss Morales, I'm here to make sure you have what you need and that you're heard. Edith's voice found some steel. I'm heard right now, thank you. I wasn't hearing anything in that hole. Bree looked at me. Do you know the man who calls himself her aide? He says his name is Kyle Benton. He's been around the church. Is he licensed? Tamika asked. He says he is. The curtain opened again like somebody had rehearsed a play about timing. Kyle walked in with a tote bag and a face chiseled into concern. Miss M, are you okay? Oh, my word, I turned my back for 1 minute to get fans from the garage, and you... He pressed his hand to his heart, like it was surprised too. Diane stepped between him and the bed like a bouncer. We're limiting visitors until we sort this out. Kyle's smile never dimmed, but it sharpened. I'm her caregiver. I have responsibility. That's not how hospitals work, Diane said, cheer gentle, stance immovable. Bree did the badge thing again. Mr. Benton, Detective Matthews, we'll be needing a few minutes. He sat, crossed one ankle over a knee, and folded his hands like a model citizen in a pamphlet. I understand there's been a misunderstanding. Miss Morales has mild confusion in the evenings. She wandered into the shelter during the siren test. I secured the door because he let the sentence finish itself with a shrug and a schoolteacher's face. Safety. You put a lock on it, I said. A cheap lock. Anyone could open it. Even a nosy neighbor, I said, not smiling. He exhaled like a man with a burdensome heart. This hostility won't help, Miss M. I have signed documentation authorizing me to coordinate her care. Temporary guardianship. Her niece sent it from Arizona. Tamika held out her hand without changing expression. I'll take a look at that. He produced a folder, 2 pages, notary stamps. All legal, he said. Tamika glanced, didn't blink. We'll verify with the court. Of course, he said, and gave me a look like he'd already won. When he left, Edith turned her head and said, Walker, I gave you a message, and I don't think you saw it. What message? The church bulletin at potluck last Sunday. She licked lips that had color again. He handed me a stack of forms between the green bean casserole and the beveled eggs and told me to sign so Lena won't worry. I circled the hymn and wrote H-E-L-P on the back. My hand shook. I think people thought I was just annotating. I kept trying to get your eye. And I remembered her waving me over, her pen fluttering, me across the room refilling teams of iced tea. I felt the memory like a bruise. I should have seen you, I said. You do now, she whispered. That night, I drove home under a sky that was pretending to be calm. At the kitchen table, I opened my laptop and scrubbed through my doorbell camera footage from the last week. Brian used to tease me about my cameras. What are you, the CIA? he'd say, and then he'd ask me to replay a video of the raccoon who stole the hummingbird feeder like it was a heist movie. The camera picked up Kyle on Saturday at 6:22 p.m., dragging the lock across Edith's concrete like he wanted the click to be heard. The camera heard a lot. The lock's metallic cough, the faint tap, tap, tap like a heart on the other side of a wall. I saved it. I sent it to Bree and Tamika with a calm email I rewrote 3 times. In the morning, my phone rang at 8:03. "Ms. Walker," Bree said, "your ring clip helps, and Kyle's not on the state registry of licensed caregivers." A breath. We also got a tip from a bank fraud officer on another case. There's a pattern of small, daily cash withdrawals and transfers on death forms in households where he's helped. It's circumstantial until it's not. We're digging. I drove to Dee's Diner for coffee because coffee tastes like a plan when you drink it in public. Dee sets mugs down with a thunk that says she believes in you. On the corkboard above the condiments, a flyer I hadn't noticed hung with 3 thumbtacks. "Guardianship and you know your rights," it said. It was dated in May. I took a photo. An idea took shape like a Polaroid. When I took coffee to go, Molly from Midwest First, blonde ponytail, nails perpetually chipped from opening envelopes, said like she was reading my mind, "I can't tell you client details, but if I saw unusual patterns with older customers, and if I had APS on speed dial, I wouldn't be sleeping well either." She laid a business card on the counter. "If anyone asks, you found that on the sidewalk." At Edith's house, I let myself in the back door with the key she gave me ages ago in case my oven decides to get clever. The place hummed with the quiet that follows commotion. On the counter sat a pill organizer, the kind with days of the week on little plastic lids. Tuesday's evening slot was empty. Thursday's morning was still full. The dosage printed on the taped-up paper from Dr. Klein didn't match the pills in the box. It was the kind of sloppy control that makes me madder than a clean lie does. I photographed the organizer and the paper with my phone, holding today's newspaper next to both because Brian taught me that any photo is better when it tells time. Tamika texted to say APS had secured an emergency order to keep Kyle away pending a hearing, and that they'd appointed a neutral party to manage decisions until Edith's niece arrived. He sent us a binder of care logs, color-coded. He's not dumb. She added a smiley face that didn't smile. I drove to St. Anne's with a bag of Edith's favorite things, her cardigan that smells like woolite and Sunday, a small framed picture of Frank at the county fair with a prize-winning tomato, and the sunflower charm bracelet her husband bought at the Larkspur Fall Festival 25 years ago. The volunteer at the front desk said, "Room 12, and handed me a printed sticker with my name on it like I was starting first grade again. Diane had Edith propped with pillows and her hair combed. "You should have been a stylist," I told her. "Honey, I work the brush like a scalpel," she said, smiling for the first time with her eyes, then left us alone with the beep of monitors and the whisper of hospital air. Edith traced the bracelet with her thumb the way you do when you're reminding yourself where you've been. "I want my own house back," she said, tears brightening without falling. "Not because it's big, because it's mine. My chair, my piano, my messy drawer where the scotch tape and the thank you notes share a nest." "You'll get it," I said, like a promise could lay shingles. That afternoon, I met with Bree and Tamika in a hospital consultation room, decorated with a painting of sailboats that have never seen our landlocked town. Bree laid out a plan with the patience of a woman who has talked fast at the wrong time and learned better. "We can charge him with unlawful restraint based on the shelter alone," she said, "but his kind gets slippery on paper. He's building the narrative that he's the only responsible adult in the room, and Miss Morales is a poor dear." "Excuse me," Edith said, half sitting. "I am no one's poor dear." "Exactly," Bree said. "If he admits motive, control for money, we have more than a lock. We have intent." I felt my stomach tighten. "What do you need me to do?"
Invite him somewhere he forgets to edit himself, where he thinks he's talking to a neighbor, not the police. D's, I said. It wasn't a question. We set it for Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. I wore a cardigan in a shade Jim at the hardware store calls cornbread because it looks sunny even when you're shaky. Tamika pinned a button-sized transmitter inside near my collarbone and had me practice pressing the hidden panic button 3 times. Only if you feel unsafe. 3 taps. Don't overthink it, she said. At home, I sat on the edge of the bed with Brian's old shirt in my hands and said out loud, I don't want to be brave. It made no difference. Courage doesn't care if you want it. It asks if you'll show up. Dee's diner glows like a nightlight after dark. The neon pie sign hums and the booths creak like they're confiding. I chose the booth that faces the door because I learned years ago that life feels better when you pick your chair. Kyle came in at 7:36. He slid into the opposite side like a man confident in his lines. Joan, he said, softening his voice like a band warming up, I appreciate you reaching out. Emotions make situations messy. I prefer solutions. Me too, I said. Edith's ring is missing. You bring it, she signs. No more locking doors, no more papers until her niece gets here. He smiled the way people do when they think they're about to win clean. He reached into his jacket and set a velvet pouch on the table. He was holding it for safekeeping, he said. She misplaces things. It would break my heart if she lost something precious. I palmed the pouch and didn't look inside. Where did you find it? Top dresser drawer, he said, like a test he expected me to fail, next to where I'll put the deed when she's comfortable signing it. There it was, the sentence that tells you the part a man thinks belongs to him. If she's comfortable, I said. Yes, he replied, leaning forward, voice dropping so I could hear the aim. It's better for everyone if I have control. She's safer, the house doesn't sit empty, the bills get paid, and there's a fee for management. I'm not ashamed to say my time is worth something. The mic hummed against my collarbone, sending his words to the police radios 3 storefronts away. My hands went cold and hot at the same time. Under the table, I pressed the panic sequence, 3 fast taps, because while his voice was a lullaby, the look in his eyes was not. You look nervous, he said, noticing my breath catch. You should be careful about making trouble you can't carry. Like locking someone in a box, I asked, and kept my voice from shaking by holding it with both hands. He exhaled a laugh. It was 85 degrees, he said, shrugging. It's not ideal, but do you want her breaking a hip? Do you want to be the one to clean her up when she forgets how to get to the bathroom? This is messy, Joan. I'm the one willing to hold the mess.
He reached into his bag again. I expected another folder. He pulled out a small black taser, kept low under the table's edge, the click just loud enough to be real. Give me your phone and the ring, he said, smile never moving. Then stand up and walk out. I'll handle the rest. You won't, Bree said, appearing beside the booth the way a door opens in a dream when you've been pushing and pushing. Her badge flashed. Police, hands on the table. Kyle froze, then smiled like a man at a banquet who realizes he's been seated next to the judge. He set the taser on the formica and lifted his palms, eyes sliding to mine. For a breath, he looked like he might run. He didn't. When they cuffed him, he tried for dignity and got a chair squeak and a smear of pie on his sleeve instead. There's no soundtrack in real life, but if there had been, it would have been the coffee maker dripping and the waitress saying "good" under her breath. The hearing at the Marion County Courthouse took 2 weeks to schedule. It felt like 2 months. While we waited, Edith came home and we built a fortress out of practical things. A lock that turned on the right side of her own doors, a door chime that sang when someone opened it, a list of who could visit and when, taped by her phone so she could point to it if she didn't feel like repeating herself.
We wrote out her medications on a big calendar the way Brian used to keep track of fertilizer and oil changes. We put Molly's card on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a cow that mooed when you pressed it. Because if you can't laugh while you're scared, you end up with only one tool in your toolbox. Lena, Edith's niece, flew in from Phoenix with a rolling suitcase and a hug that was almost rude in its sincerity. "I should have come sooner," she said to me in the driveway, eyes wet. I believed what I wanted to believe, that she had help, that she was okay, that busy is the same thing as responsible. "Busy is where trouble hides," I said. We shook on getting to know each other. In court, the judge wore steel hair and patience. Tamika presented APS's findings, the shelter lock, the zip tie, the notary stamp that a forensic examiner said looked scanned and printed. Bree played the ring clip with the tap, tap, tap and the lock's cough. The bank's fraud specialist laid out a tidy timeline of cash withdrawals in round numbers, like somebody counting on their fingers. Dee's recording, my cardigan mic, filled the wood-paneled room with Kyle's voice calling control efficient, describing a plan to manage a deed and a fee. Diane from St. Anne spoke about the mismatch between Edith's printed medication plan and the pills in the box, about the way sedation can be a leash if you don't watch the hand holding it. Kyle's attorney tried to paint a picture of a good man overwhelmed by responsibility. The judge's mouth barely moved when she said, "Mr. Benton, emergency guardianship is a tool to protect, not to plunder." She signed 3 orders with a pen that drew a line I could feel from the back row. Kyle was barred from contact with Edith. The documents he had placed in front of her were void. APS would hold authority until Lena's durable power of attorney paperwork was completed and on file. Outside, on the courthouse steps, the wind lifted the last of the yellow leaves like confetti. Edith slid the velvet ring pouch into my hand. She said, "Hold on to this while I eat my celebratory pie. I don't trust myself not to fling my hands around." We went to Dee's. There are moments when food tastes like a rival. The coffee was ordinary and perfect. Dee brought pumpkin pie with real whipped cream, like an apology the universe had been waiting to make. We made plans. Edith told Lena which boxes to label piano music first. Lena made a list in a neat teacher script. I wrote Silver Watch at the top of a paper playmat without thinking. "What's that?" Edith asked. "Something we're going to start, a little volunteer net. After storms, after holidays, after long weekends, we'll knock. We'll bring brownies and questions and won't leave when the answers are too smooth. We'll learn the paperwork. We'll carry magnifying glasses and good pens." We started in November with 15 people and a plate of peanut butter cookies in the fellowship hall. Tamika came with handouts about guardianship and powers of attorney. Bree sent a deputy with a talk called Trust But Verify, and he blushed when the church ladies clapped for him. The bank lent us a whiteboard, and Molly drew diagrams of how not to title your house to a stranger you met at choir practice. Diane taught half the town how to organize meds with a calendar and a highlighter. We called it Silver Watch because that's what we hope to be. Not flashy, not loud, just steady and hard to break. Edith chose to move to Larkspur Oaks, a retirement community that smells like cinnamon toast and furniture polish. She picked an apartment that faces a courtyard with a flagpole and a maple that's smaller than mine, but trying. The first time I visited, she had 3 new friends and a job, organizing the hymn books for the Sunday chapel service. She kept her house. A nice family with twins rents it now. They leave notes in her mailbox about their tomato plants and ask if she has advice about their kids not wanting to practice piano. She leaves lemon cookies on her porch and writes on the note, "Bribe them with cookies and praise the effort." When winter came, the kind that blurs fields and makes fences look like sketches, I found myself at my kitchen table writing names on a list. People to check on when the electric flickers, people who don't have family nearby, people who need someone to change the smoke detector battery on the back stairs. I wrote Ruth Pritchard and circled it because her name had come up in Bree's office and in my sleep. Bree called in January to say the DA had added charges to Kyle's case related to Ruth: fraud, exploitation. There would be no dramatic TV trial. He took a plea. He would serve time. It felt quiet, and it felt right. On Sundays, I still sit near the back at church. Same pew, second from the end. Pastor Mike preached a sermon in February about the Good Samaritan that didn't make us roll our eyes, which is high praise in a town that can sniff out a cliche at 30 paces. He said help isn't a mood. It's a habit you practice so that when the day comes, you don't have to ask if you're the kind of person who stops. You just stop. People started sliding notes across diner tables to me. My aunt, my neighbor, my dad's friend. Each note had a story attached, and none of them had dramatic music. Sometimes it was as small as a new friend offering to streamline someone's bills. Sometimes it was as grand as a house up for sale by owner, with a young man answering all the questions. Sometimes it was just a weird feeling. And I tell people that their guts are not cruel, they're wise. On a Tuesday in March that smelt like thawed mud and hope, Edith and I sat on the bench by the Larkspur Oaks front door and watched 3 robins fight over a worm. She wore her sunflower bracelet and a scarf Lena knitting in colors that shouldn't match and do. She leaned her head on my shoulder. She said, "People ask me if I'm angry. The answer is yes, but not in a way that burns the furniture. In a way that makes me bring cookies to meetings where we teach grandmothers legal words. I still get mad at myself for not seeing sooner," I said. She laughed, a sound like sheet music flipping. Then we match. That's why we make a good choir. On the first warm day of April, I washed my porch screens and put the hummingbird feeder back up. A week later, a hummingbird hovered like a thought right in my face and then zipped away. That night, I heard the storm sirens test and felt no lightning in my bones. I thought about the sound in September. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. I'll never hear it the same way again. I'm not sorry. I'd rather live awake than live unbothered. The summer after everything happened, Silverwatch hosted a potluck in the park. Half the church came, and half the town that never goes to church came too because casseroles don't care about attendance records. We had lawn chairs and a folding table dedicated to homemade pickles. The sheriff's office set up a tent and passed out refrigerator magnets with phone numbers for APS and the non-emergency line. Kids chased bubbles between the tables like Hope wearing sneakers. Dee brought pie and didn't charge anyone, which made 3 men pretend to fight over who would slip money into her hand when she wasn't looking. Edith told the story of her storm shelter to a circle of people who weren't there. She didn't rush it or dramatize it. She said, "He called it safety. It was a lock. Learn the difference." Then she held up a tiny bell and said, "This is the doorbell from my back door. We changed it out for a louder one, but I keep this on my desk now. It reminds me that the world is full of knocks you should answer." When the evening cooled and the kids got sticky with popsicles, Pastor Mike led us in Amazing Grace, because that's what people do when they don't know what else to sing. I stood next to people I'd known for 30 years, and next to 3 I'd met that day. And I thought of Brian, who used to sing flat on purpose to make me roll my eyes. I thought of the shelter, of the lock, of the numbers, of the tiny mouth of a microphone humming under my collar. I thought of every person who has ever knocked and waited and hoped somebody would hear. And I thought, we're not perfect, but we're louder than we used to be. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I make a mental tour of our town, like I used to make the mail route in my head. I picture Dee turning off the neon Chi sign. I picture Molly locking the bank's side door and checking the night depository twice.
I pictured Diane at St. Anne's, fluffing a pillow for someone whose daughter can't get there until morning. I pictured Tamika driving home with a stack of files and a bag of drive-through fries she'll eat cold at her kitchen counter. I picture Bree sitting on her couch with her shoes off, staring at a caseboard, and then finally letting herself watch a dumb sitcom, because even the brave need to turn down the sound sometimes. I picture Edith in her chair by the window, feet in a pair of slippers I bought on sale, and she pretended to hate because they're leopard print, and then wore every day. I picture her hand sliding over the sunflower charms, each petal catching a little light. I picture Lena at the table, sorting papers into labeled folders like a woman building a fence around what matters. I picture myself at the sink, rinsing a coffee cup, listening for a sound I now recognize and will never ignore. If you asked me what love looks like at 62, I would not say roses or someone to hang Christmas lights. Not anymore. I would say love is a faint tapping from under a door and the decision to run toward it. Love is sitting on a plastic chair in an ER at 2 a.m. and saying, no, she isn't confused, she's angry. Love is knowing which lock to turn and which one to break and learning paperwork so you can pull someone you love through a system built for patients you do not have. Love is pie at a diner after a court hearing and the way coffee tastes like a future. September came around again, which feels like a magic trick every year. The sirens did their test. I stood in the yard and counted to make sure the maple had the same number of large branches it did the day before. The wind shifted and brought the smell of cut grass and somebody grilling. Edith called and asked if I wanted to split a lemon bar at Dee's and teach a new volunteer how to set boundaries with a helper who doesn't know what the word means. Always, I said, and grabbed my keys. We sat in our booth, the one where things changed, and we bit into lemon that made us pucker. Across the diner, a young woman with a fussy baby bounced him while trying to sign a form on a clipboard. Her mother sat beside her, cheeks pink, glasses sliding down her nose, trying to read the fine print. I stood up without thinking and walked my list across the room like a school supply. I'm nosy, I said, smiling, and I volunteer with a group that reads forms for free. They both laughed, relief visible. The mother handed me the clipboard. Honey, she said, be as nosy as you want. I read the paper. It was innocuous this time, a vaccination record. But they didn't know, and the world is full of things you can't know until someone shows you. I pointed, I explained, we all exhaled. On my way back to our booth, I saw the neon pie sign reflected in the window and thought about how many lights you can hang on a town if you try. When we left, the dusk felt like a room where someone had turned on a lamp. Edith tucked her hand into the crook of my arm, the way friends do when they've stopped pretending they don't need the lean. She said, "Hear that?" It wasn't the siren this time. It was the tap of a cane against the sidewalk, the soft slap of a screen door closing 3 houses down, the distant ping of someone pulling a flat garden hose across a driveway, the clink of a wind chime next door, 2 cars starting in sequence like a duet, the music of a place paying attention to itself. I hear it, I said, loud and clear. If you're listening, there are knocks everywhere. A muttered help on a potluck, written on the back of a hymn, a bank teller's careful, hypothetically, a nurse's raised eyebrow, a detective's patient plan, a neighbor's doorbell that catches a lock you weren't meant to hear. There are hands on the other side of doors who don't know you yet, but need you to be the person who knocks and waits and knocks again. I am 62, and I am tired in new ways and alive in the way you get when you remember that the mail wasn't just my job, it was a metaphor. You take what's entrusted to you, you sort it, you make sure what needs to arrive gets there, even if you have to walk it up a driveway and knock. So this is my story. If you need me to, I'll tell it again. No dramatic sound effects, no soundtrack swelling, just a locked door in the ground, the numbers 4211, the idea that safety and control are not synonyms, a velvet pouch holding a ring that belongs to a woman who will not be locked away, a diner booth, a microphone the size of a button, a taser that clicked but didn't fire, a judge's pen making a line with weight, a choir of people who decided they'd rather be bothered than be sorry, a bracelet that catches the light when a woman gestures and says, "Learn the difference," a town humming with taps that are not alarms but invitations to act. Love is small and stubborn. It doesn't ask if it's your business. It makes it your business. It hears the faint sound under the daily noise and says, "I've got you," and walks toward the door.